Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Before we start any discussions, I just want to restate the purpose of this live stream. First and foremost, the Communist Party of China has created a dangerous nation, and many Westerners are unaware of this fact and remain oblivious to the harm that they pose to the world. As such, we are here to discuss certain events that our viewers may or may not be aware of. Events that highlight China's history of violations in the fields of human rights and international law. Additionally, when presented with the opportunities, we will also be presenting our personal experiences and opinions. This leads us to the topic of today's live stream, the content of the South in the South China Sea, or it is the Indo-Pacific dispute. The live stream today by Lee Sang-Nguyen with the university students. Today we will be joined with Steve. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for having me again. It's my pleasure to be back.
Hi, and hi, Sunny. How are you?
Hi, Lisa. I'm good. Thank you for having me back as well.
Nice seeing you both again tonight. So tonight we'll be talking about the Indo-Pacific dispute. So, Steve, can you, what do you think? You have any contributions about any general understanding of why South China Sea is so important to the world and to Southeast Asian countries?
Right. Yeah, I mean, definitely. And for those of you who might not be aware, amongst the viewers, I'm currently in my third year of university, and I'm studying international relations. And the discussion about the South China Sea is a very constant topic that is brought about. It's something that you come across a lot in your studies and in drafting reports, and I feel like a lot of people don't really understand how important it is to Western countries, to especially the South Asian countries, and in fact, the South China Sea carries tremendous strategic importance, since 1/3 of the world's shipments pass through it. This means it allows for over $3 trillion in trade each year.
Wow.
And yeah, like furthermore, the sea contains like lucrative oil and gas reserves, along with a bunch of fisheries that these Southeast Asian countries rely on for business and for food security. And upon like further research that I've been doing in order to prepare for this talk, I found out that 40% of the world's liquefied gas transfers through the South China Sea. So this is such a key.
40%.
Yeah, 40%
of the world's liquefied gas. Wow.
Yes, it's transferred through the South China Sea, through the pipes that are underground or afloat. And it's amazing because I did not realize all these things. I did not understand its complete significance until I started doing a bunch more research on it. And to know that we have so many countries that are highly dependent on it. For example, Brunei, China, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Taiwan, and Vietnam. Knowing how dependent these countries are on it and how dependent the world economy is on the South China Sea, it makes it clear that as soon as there's interference in this area, in this region, all these other countries are going to be affected. And this interference is usually incited by China. And
Wow.
once China starts doing something here, it doesn't only affect China. China is not the only one that is benefiting or losing out. It's all these other countries, all these other international organizations that are being directly impacted.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Sunny, what do you think of this?
Yeah, I think it's really terrible to hear that China is affecting all of these countries and their land.
Mhm.
And what do you think of the 40% of the world's liquefied gas trade transfer through the South China Sea? That is a huge.
Yeah,
Isn't
I think it's really sad to hear, especially on the fact that these resources belong to other countries and that these countries could be increasing their economy, whereas China has a pretty strong economy already. And to hear that China's basically manipulating this to their advantage and taking these resources from people who could use these as their jobs or their livelihood, it's really sad to hear.
wow.
Mhm.
Okay, so what do you think is what has been happening, Sunny? Since-
So, like Steve was saying, since the end of World War II, countries have been competing for control over particular regions of the Indo-Pacific Sea, also known as the South China Sea. And in particular, these efforts from China have actually been focused on the Paracel and Spratly Islands.
the
It's
Spratly and Paracel Island,
yeah,
as we're seeing right now.
yes, yeah. And
So yeah,
if you look on the map, the Spratly Islands are closest to Brunei, Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines. Yet for decades, China has been declaring them as theirs. And on the other
yeah,
hand,
but sorry, I'm a Vietnamese, so as far as I know, the Paracel Islands and the Spratly Island belong to Vietnam since as of the map in 1954. So like many years, many 100 years ago, it belonged to Vietnam. These two islands, the Spratly Island and the Paracel Islands, part of that belong to Vietnam. But
okay, yeah, that's a
yeah,
very good point you bring up. And it's sad because in recent years, it's shown that China has been increasing their efforts to reclaim or to claim this land as theirs. And they've been doing this by physically increasing the size of the islands. And this could mean like piling onto existing reefs and destroying them basically, or like constructing ports or military installations and airstrips on these islands. And it's really sad to hear, and it's really bad for the environment as well.
wow. Yeah, as far as we know, this will affect several countries as well. So, um, with the sea creatures, and we like seafood, right? So, these are a huge
Mhm.
amount of, seafood and everything
Right.
benefits.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but mm, so so as we can see here that the satellite image has shown China's build up an artificial islands as of in the
Right.
red line that everybody's seeing here.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. So why does China believe its own it has it can own the entirely of almost like 80% of the South they call it South China Sea, but it actually the real name it is the Indo-Pacific. But then
Right.
China renamed it to the South China Sea, and
Mhm.
then
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, and then declare this is belong to them because the name is China Sea. So
Mhm.
yeah, so why does China believe its own the entirety of the South China Sea or the Indo-Pacific?
Mhm. Right. And this is a great point to discuss because a lot of people don't understand, why it is called the South China Sea in the first place, or why China has been making such efforts, as Sunny had just mentioned earlier. Building on these uh, creating new islands, around different countries. The Philippines, I know, several islands were built extremely close to Manila, the capital. I'm not sure if has events like that taken place near Vietnam as well. Would you know,
Yeah, it is.
Lisa? Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
And mhm. And China has been doing this, all of this. Well, one for modern reasons, to contain, you know, the South China Sea, Indo-Pacific Sea. Um, they're establishing military bases on these islands in order to ensure that, you know, the fisheries of these other countries or the navies of these other countries aren't coming close enough to disturb the activities that Chinese fishermen and Chinese corporations are doing in these waters, you know. And all of this is based off of something known as the 9-line, which was originally the 11-line, indicated by the Kuomintang government, the Republic of China in 1947. And yeah, so 1947, Kuomintang government established this 11-line in order to territorially map out what they believed belonged to China. And this was revised around 1949 by Zhou Enlai, the People's Republic of China. And, you know, he ascribed the 9-line instead to, you know, kind of simplify it. They were trying to give leeway to these other countries, but, you know, as we can see by the marked territorial waters, they have left nothing for Vietnam, for the Philippines, Brunei, Indonesia. And you could generalize it, you could simplify it by saying this is all just based off of historical basis. You know, when they were establishing this 9-line, this 11-line, they were not consulting the international community, they were not consulting international organizations, they were not taking into consideration how this line demarking their territorial waters would affect the economy of other countries, the livelihoods of millions of people from those countries. And it was just a systematically selfish thing to do. And this is all, you know, it all goes back to the fact that they are so centered on themselves, you know. China does all these things. They try to make it look like they're helping other countries, you know, funding them for trains and stuff like that. But in reality, they are just seeking to benefit and profit from everything that they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from looking at this map, I can see like they took most of the more than 80% or almost 90% of the sea.
Right.
The sea surface, as well as minerals and everything including in that. From our case, we know that that's why they've been like spending a lot of money buying the government of Vietnam. And what they did is they just simply bought the government, like corrupt them with lots of money, and then make them sign documents and declare or whatever. And then they also make the Vietnamese government open entirely border to let China came to Vietnam freely. Like 7 borders has been fully open, and then millions of Chinese people went to Vietnam and live there and mix with Vietnam and so forth, and also control and watch, and also they captures all of the minerals, the sea and whatever they can do. Like they try to take all the natural resources, whatever we have, as well as they try to. Right now, we are at a very dangerous state that like they try to Han Hoa, like they try to make us Hanification. Yeah, same as they did to the Tibetans as well. Like they control the economics by open up a lot of trades and businesses inside Vietnam, bought a lot of properties, control and open manufacturers and damage the environments, and creating a very very poor living conditions for the Vietnamese people as well. Why they feed the government, make them become rich and armed with lots of power and so forth. And that's why it's that's why we right now we really worry about Vietnam. But at the same time, as a Canadian European, I also worry a lot about the safety for the world in terms of free trades and
Right.
the presence of China's on this
Mm-hmm.
on the South China Sea will affect the safety of the world as well.
Yeah, and even the environment, because like the things that they're doing to each of the islands and what they're doing to the coral reefs there is like really really sad to hear that it's all
Right.
for just for goods and for their own like power and greed. Like to hear that coral reefs are being destroyed is really sad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No wonder
And
why recently there are vessels and also what do we suddenly call like the um, like America and American and as well as Australia and Indians government
mm-hmm.
send their vessel
Right.
to the South China Sea,
Mm-hmm.
hoping to control or stop China
Mm-hmm.
from govern the entire area.
Right. And then they speak out against these governments, against India, US, Australia, for coming into the South China Sea, but it's difficult because they don't understand that the international community does not recognize these waters as belonging to them. And I'm looking at a map right now, and it's amazing I mean, amazing in a negative way, the things that they've done. Essentially they have taken 80% of the waters belonging to the Philippines, 70% of the ones belonging to Vietnam. Um, Brunei's territorial waters are entirely consumed by the South China Sea, and Malaysia only has like 10% left. So they have just
Wow,
completely taken everything.
wow. I hope that in the near future we can brought in some people who belong to these countries so that we can
Right.
discuss and talk to them about this. However,
Mm-hmm.
looking at particular cases, how would you say this has impacted Vietnam?
Right. So I could talk more in this. Um, so it all, we have to understand that this has been a contention point of contention for decades now, decades upon decades. And you have said that Vietnam has had control of the Scarborough Shoal and um, the other cluster of islands for hundreds of years now. But in the Geneva Accords, which happened in 1954, which was a conference that involved diplomats and representation from the United States, South and North Korea, the Soviet Union, France, Vietnam, and the United Kingdom. This is where Vietnam was given these waters by this group of delegates. These group of countries sat down together, and they discussed and they decided, what, this does belong to Vietnam, and they have the right to these islands, in particular territories south of the 17th parallel, which included, as you had mentioned earlier, like islands of the Paracels and the Spratlys. However, this all became extremely difficult for Vietnam because the North Vietnamese government claimed that the People's Republic of China were the lawful owners of the country of the islands placed under South Vietnam. And despite the internationally recognized agreements made under the Geneva Accords, they went on to say that the South Vietnamese people, the South Vietnamese government, unlawfully took control of them. And this built up and was one of the key factors that led to the war surrounding Vietnam, right? And these issues led to several naval disputes between the two countries, and it still continues to lead to naval disputes between every single affected country, and disputes that have left a lot more Vietnamese um, soldiers and fishermen dead than the Chinese. Disputes that have led to the condemnation of the international community and international organizations. Yet China
Yeah.
has done nothing.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you, but we do have an agreement that back in 1954,
Mhm.
the Vietnam had divided into two, like a
Right,
north
right.
and the south.
That's right. Mhm.
So the South government owned the Paracels and the Spratly Islands.
Yes, yes.
The North,
That's right.
the North didn't. The North just
Mhm.
have this part here.
Right.
However, the as you know that China bought the Vietnamese, the North people,
Right.
and
Right.
make them become communists. Like
Right.
they both are communists. They even,
Mhm.
China support the North
Right.
by giving them a lot of money.
Mhm.
If I remember correctly, that is um, 3.5 billions or something like that, about
Wow.
a lot of money, plus 320,000 soldiers
Mhm.
come from China, helping the North to fight over the South.
Right.
Yeah, that was there was a war in between the North and the South, and causing
Mhm.
lots of deaths for the Vietnamese people. And when in 1958, the North, the China declared that their territory waters by declaring this 9-line, and
Mhm.
immediately the North government, who is the government that been bought by China, wrote a letter that saying, "Oh, we comply with your declaration. What you declared
Mhm.
is yours." So, however, the Paracel Island and the Spratly Island wasn't belong to the North. It
Right.
belonged to the South. Therefore,
Mhm.
this is not right. So at that time, the North is one country and the South is one country.
Mhm.
So talking about that, I like to explain a little bit about the Paris Conference. In 1973, on January, we have a Paris Accord conference trying to bring peace to Vietnam and so forth. However, at that time, the Paris Conference saying that the um, the North and the South will rejoin, and there will be a free elections will be organized in the South, so that the South can choose their own government, as well as all country have to withdraw out from Vietnam. No country allowed to influence the politics in Vietnam.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that was in 1973. And 30 days after they signed the Paris Accord agreement, peace agreement, there was an act of international law that signed by 12 partners. In there, there was 11, like 11 country plus
Mhm.
um, one party. And what they say is, they say that they acknowledge the territories of Vietnam as of the Vietnam map in 1954. What that means is they imply in there the Paracel Islands and the Spratly Island actually belong to Vietnam. And
Mhm.
China is one of the countries signed that um, acts of international law uh, on March 2nd, 1973.
Mhm.
So as a result of that, China um, had violated the agreement that they signed back in 1973.
Right.
Yeah. So I just want to give you a bit of feedback on why why even though China bought the North government, making
Mhm.
them to comply with what China declared for their territory, is still an invalid statement, an invalid declaration,
Right.
because China himself has signed the agreement
Mhm.
that acknowledge and state that it will um, comply with in the agreement has been signed with 12 partners, another 11 partners. So China is one of those. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So what do you think, Sunny?
Yeah, I think it's really sad, and like we should be using these agreements to fight back against it.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, mm, so what do you think, Sunny, with this situation with other countries? Do you know, besides Vietnam, how does other country being affected? What do they?
Well, I would say that the situation is pretty similar to the other affected countries. One, they already have legitimate claims to these ocean territories. Two, they are being contradicted by China based on historical claims. And three, they end up getting into naval disputes. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Mhm.
Does anyone know of any social violations between China and other countries over disputes regarding the South China Sea?
Mhm. Well, I know of a few. I'm definitely not extremely well versed in this field, but um, I know that in the Philippines there were a lot of points of contentions, especially dealing with fishermen and rival fishermen from China who have crossed the West Philippine Sea's boundaries and started using these grounds as their own fisheries, and oftentimes our fishermen are not able to compete. They're not able to um, get the resources necessary in order to sustain themselves, economically, or so to sustain their own businesses, because they're competing with Chinese vessels, which are far more technologically advanced, and in many cases, um, these fishermen have actually been, the fishermen who've had catches have had their catches taken away by um, Chinese fishermen, and oftentimes this has happened at gunpoint. So
Wow.
Chinese fishermen would come directly in front of these Philippine vessels, and they would end up, threatening them if they didn't hand over their catches. They'd be shot and killed on the spot. Sometimes these Chinese fishermen would trade, like, it sounds insane, but they would exchange instant noodles for their
Wow.
entire cats.
Wow.
And it's mind-boggling because unfortunately in the Philippines their president does not do anything about these matters because he is trying to closely align himself with China in order to gain the favor of the communists there. He is trying to establish a greater power in the Philippines, and he's hoping to do that through China. And I know it's not in the same topic, but it's mind-boggling to me because the Philippines has begun to sell its land as a form of business for China, and there are now plots of land in the Philippines that are owned solely by China, and it's amazing.
Same thing happened here in Vietnam too.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have so many beautiful area. As you can see, Vietnam is along the sea line. Therefore, we got lots of
Mhm.
beautiful view and scene and so forth. And they own the lands and so forth. They bought it even though the law say that no foreigner can own lands in Vietnam. However,
Right.
China, they just fake it. They make all kind of thing lies and lots of lies behind. Like
Mhm.
yeah, and then they buy lands and so forth. And they change
Right.
name. They do everything. And
Mhm.
they brought in a lot of crimes uh, and negatives.
Mhm.
Back to the socials as well, such as um, organ harvest, um,
Mhm.
as well as spec marriage, you know, uh, cocaine, um, drugs dealers, all kind of thing, casinos and murderers and marriage, selling fetus and selling infants and all kind of things. Not crimes along with their coming to Vietnam.
Right.
Well, so what do you think? What can we do? What should be done? So we, as you can see, the world needs to force China to retreat and stop China from becoming a stronger threat to the free world. Not only is China encroaching on the boundaries of several Asian nations, it also claims over 80% of the South China Sea or the Indo-Pacific Sea, militarizing the Paracels and Spratly Island. These islands belong to Vietnam. This has threatened the US and international freedom of navigation. For us, recently, what we did is we submit a petition. Let me show you solutions that we recommend or we now asking for people to help with is just 1 second here that I try to go into no, while I'm looking for that document, Steve, what do you know about the case between China and Philippines concerning the Spratly Island, the one that happened a few years ago?
Oh, so honestly, between 2013 when it first happened and now, yeah, a lot has happened. In terms of international law being applied and the condemnation of China, but to be honest, not a lot has been done. So in 2013, an arbitration case was brought by the Republic of the Philippines against the People's Republic of China regarding the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea on the law of the sea, and they did this because both of these countries are part of the UN, and yes, basically it was concerning several issues that the Philippines had about the South China Sea, and in particular the legality of China's 9-dash line, right? So this happened in the Philippines brought this to the UN's court in 2013, and on February 19, 2013 as well, China declared that it would not participate in the arbitration. And they sent a paper explaining their position, and several months later, the arbitral tribunal ruled that it has jurisdiction over the case, regardless of the fact if China wanted to participate or not. And it took up to it took into consideration the 7 of the 15 submissions of the Philippines. So on the 12th of July, 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration ruled in favor of the Philippines. So this was composed of delegates, UN delegates from different countries that had specialties when it came to maritime, territorial law, and they took into account the history that China was proposing in terms of its creation, the 11-dash line and the 9-dash line, But it also took into consideration the territorial claims, the legitimate territorial claims that the Philippines has had for decades, because each and every single country each and every single coastal country has its right to a particular span of water. And this span of water was not being respected by China. And they claimed that it would not rule on any questions of sovereignty over, and territory would not delimit any maritime boundary between the parties. So the tribunal also ruled that China has no historical rights based on the 9-line map. And China, being China, has rejected this ruling. But additionally, the International Court also came to rule that China has breached its obligations under the Convention of the International Regulations for Preventing Collisions at Sea and Article 94 of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. And these are basically because a lot of quote unquote accidents that happen between China and the Philippines are claimed to be because vessels are crashing into each other. And that is what is being reported by China, but that is not what's being reported in the Philippines. You see numerous articles of the firsthand accounts of these fishermen claiming that the only reason these crashes happened or collisions occurred was because these Chinese vessels were coming closer to them to intimidate them, to as I mentioned before, get their supply of fish for the day. And China was just twisting the story and making it seem like it was just an accident, something that happens every day. But of course this wasn't the case, and they ruled in favor of the Philippines. They stood by the Philippines and their claims to the span of the West Philippine Sea. And because they are international rulings, there's no one to legally bind them, and China has no obligation to follow them. But at the same time, the rulings are occurring because these are the rights of the countries, and if these rights are not going to be respected, if these rights, if the rulings are not going to be honored by China, that's why the U.S. has increased its presence in the Indo-Pacific Sea in order to safeguard the rights of these affected nations of Malaysia, Brunei, Vietnam, Taiwan. They are patrolling in order to make sure that China does not overstep as much as it has been for the past few decades.
Yeah, and I think it's really sad, to hear all these countries being affected, but it's a good thing to see that the United States is taking a step up and trying to become involved. And I hope, honestly, that Canada does something similar and steps up too if they have the power to.
Right.
Yeah. That's why I talk about the agreement that they signed back in many years ago in 1973, when the 11 country, let me find out an article that there was 11 country has signed this agreement that on March 2nd, 1973. And this country, including America, French, England, let me find out, like French, England, Hungary, Poland, Indonesia, and China and Russia and Vietnam and Canada and French and England. And those are the countries who signed this under the witness of the Secretary of the United Nations. So these countries have signed the agreement saying that they respect the the territories of Vietnam as of the Geneva Accord in
Right.
1954. Yeah.
Mhm.
Therefore, Spratly Island and Paracel Island belong to Vietnam. And if you look at the pictures that we are having right now, if we take even just take away the Paracel Islands and Spratly Island, that already cut off this tongue. We call it an ox tongue, or you call it 9-dash line, but we call it ox tongue. This should be cut,
Mhm.
yeah, cut down, and that would be reduced a significant amount of the sea land, I mean the sea surface, that we're seeing right here, 3.5 million kilometers
Mhm.
expansion, occupying other countries' land. So that's why we propose this solution that
Mhm.
we think is more on a legal, and it has been agreed and been signed, because right now, when dealing with this problem, China refused to discuss in between countries. So China doesn't want to have a meeting with all of these affecting countries together with China. No, they don't.
Right.
They only agree to discuss one by one. So China with
Right.
Vietnam and China with Philippines and so forth, so on.
Mhm.
However, the act of international conference that in 1973, it was the agreement that China has signed along with the other 11 partners.
Mhm.
So that is the advantage that we have, and it all has been agreed. So China cannot back out from that agreement.
Right.
So because of that, I think that's why we like to bring up the solutions, and hoping that you now understand that can help us to present it to other people as well. And we are looking for um, 100 signatures, 100,000 signatures by the 28th of May. So right now, we submit a petition. As you can see, this is called hipdingparis.com, spelled like
Mhm.
HIEPDINHPARIS.com, hipdingparis.com. So it has English version as well. So you can go in here and click the English, and then
Mhm.
you can just click on the first one. Just click to sign the petition. That's very simple. It brings you directly to the petition. And right here, right now we have only 1,322 people signed. However, we
Mhm.
need 100,000 signatures to sign. And the title of this petition is Reconvene the Paris International Conference on Vietnam to Resolve Conflicts in South China Sea. So I just read quickly. China is encroaching on the boundaries of a number of nations, including Vietnam. The conflict in the South China Sea raises the specter of armed conflict with China. On March 2nd, 1973, the United States,
Mhm.
China, Vietnam, and 7 other nations signed an act of the International Conference on Vietnam. Those nations agree to respect Vietnam's borders and the people's right of self-determination, and the U.S., along with other nations, may reconvene the conference to resolve any such conflicts. The purpose of the conference would be: 1. To determine if China is not abiding by the terms of the Act and related treaties as it applies to the Vietnam borders. 2. If so, then to propose a resolution and demand free and fair Vietnamese election. So by signing this petition, you also help the Vietnamese people to regain their right to vote for their own leaders. So hopefully we can be free from these corrupted governments in Vietnam as well. So that's the purpose of proposing this petition, and hopefully you too can help us to propose it to the Philippines communities, to the um, American, to the Malaysia peoples to so that and
Mhm.
any other countries are being affected as well as
Right.
to the people who respecting the law. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And I also wanted to say that, if there are any people listening from, Western countries, from the United States or from Canada, or all these other democracies in Europe or Latin America, South America, to, please help in this initiative, because, the contentions in the South China Sea are just one among many that deal with um, China's, interference with the world.
Hmm.
And, you know, each and every single country is impacted by China, because China has just played such a huge role in the development of economies, or the influence on the politics of these other nations. And it's important to take a stand and to, really gear ourselves to do what is, the most morally right thing to do. And, I truly believe that it is to, fight against China, and to do all that we can in order to weaken them, to use these international laws, international organizations, to condemn them, to set up sanctions against them. And, the youth will will bring such a huge surge of energy towards this.
Yes.
Um, because if we grow up understanding this and knowing this, we can do what we need to do in order to play our part against China, whatever that may be.
Definitely. Yeah. And like one thing about the petition too is that although it's saying they're reconvening the conference for Vietnam, like that will be a huge part in helping contain China as a whole. And that will affect several different countries, not just Vietnam. Like um they're even saying in one of the, I think it was the WHO meetings a while back, that China has become such a powerhouse, and that even the United States, as strong and powerful as they are, like if we are not aware and if we're not being open, or like if we're choosing to be naive and not looking for unbiased news, we won't see that China is like slowly creeping up. And like in no way are we being racist. Like when we say China, we mean mostly the Chinese Communist Party and
Yeah.
their greed and their power. And this has been affecting even those who live in China, and they have no freedom of speech, freedom of
Yeah.
practicing their religion or anything like that. So
Mhm.
it's not in any way hateful towards Chinese people, but more so the greed of the Chinese Communist Party and their non-caring attitude, basically.
Right. Mhm.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much, Steve and Sunny, for joining us tonight and for helping us with the petition. I hope
Mhm.
that once you know about this petition exists, please also introduce it to your friends and also to the audiences who are listening to this video. Please also help us. This is a must for a free and respectful law respectful world. This
Right.
is a must to do to at least to discuss with China about um, the agreement and try to
Mhm.
find a way that more like a lawful way to resolve the problem rather than before we start the armed, resolutions
Mhm.
for to resolve the conflict.
Mhm.
So thank you so much. Thanks again for joining us. And we hope to see you next week and we will continue. Thank you
Right.
and help us to promote this. Thank you for
Great.
listening to us and please share the videos so that we have more people who sign this and
Mhm.
have a wonderful evening. Thank you, everyone.
Mhm.
Thanks,
And for you, thank you and have a wonderful day
Right.
for you and the weekends
Mhm.
as well.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Sunny.
Thank you.